Good morning, Jen. How are you?
Good morning. I am doing wonderfully. I'm so excited to talk about angels more in this podcast and get
I
going.
am too. I've been excited since yesterday. I was at a Highland Games yesterday, which was in perfect weather, and it was terribly fun. And I got to meet some of our podcast listeners in person. And so that was really, really fun. And I was telling them that we were aiming for a conversation on angels soon. So, yeah, I think there's a bunch of us looking forward to today's discussion.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm excited to get started. I guess first we can start out by, as always, having a bit of a sung invocation and inviting this energy in and creating our sacred space for this podcast. So I invite everyone to take 3 slow, deep breaths and imagine breathing in and out through your heart space. And if you're not driving or doing something that requires your vision, feel free to close your eyes and come more into your center.
So, Jen, we had an interesting thing as you were singing. That was beautiful, by the way. Um, I'll have something that Samael was saying while you were singing and just after. And he said, dancing, dancing, dancing. Greet each other with dancing, with the joy of eternal union. Turning and spinning is a holy thing. We go around and circle back again. The doors and gateways are open. They are summoned with the voices of the children crying out from earth in both need and rejoicing. The voice calls down the ways between, and we are drawn to listen. And he says, the we or the angels.
Well, so the voice draws down the angels to listen.
Yes.
Wow. That's fascinating and amazing. Thank you, Tava, and thank you, Samael.
So that when you're invoking and singing right now, here's that it attracts angels who want to hear. They think you're falling or something is about to happen and they're curious and they want to come see.
Wonderful. And I was, intentionally, as I began, I invited the Angels of the Mystical Musings podcast and the angels of the messages and the gateways and the things we were going to talk about today to use my voice to bring through the messages and to bring in the energy that we were meant to be bringing through into the podcast. So I'm very happy to know that it was effective and that it sounds like singing in general helps to do that as well, especially I'm sure singing with an intention to do that.
Yes, yes. And it's, one of the things that I know you and I've talked about before is how, if you, even if you look at the stories in the Bible, the angels are always singing. They're all, they sing praises. They are. There's a lot of discussion about angel song and how important um, it must be for the things that they do, um, based on the number of times that it's mentioned in these old texts of the things that attract them. So
Yes, and that reminds me when we were talking about this last week, and we were talking about this with Samael, and he had said, "Think of the Bible, little singer. What do angels do? We deliver the word, and we sing songs of praise." And part of us also has found that we are word and song itself. We are blended creatures, many times more so than humans. And those were words actually brought through by Tava last week as our conversations from the podcast continued after the podcast. And Samael came in a major way and was answering all kinds of questions, and then continued through text as we were texting later and talking to each other. And he then had lots more to say on the subject. So, yeah,
yeah,
that was made me think of that when you were saying how angels are all about song.
yeah, last week was wild. So for people listening, one of the things we should tell you is we get on and we start talking, and the part that you hear is often sort of in the middle. We start conversations, and then all of a sudden we go, "Oh my goodness, wait, we should just probably start recording this." And then we do the podcast, and then frequently we end the podcast and say goodbye to you. But then a whole bunch more happens. It's almost like the conversation on the podcast is a catalyst for a further discussion. So last week, we ended the podcast about the haunted tavern. Um, and for those of you who haven't heard it yet and want to go back, it's a great thing to listen to as we approach Samhain. But last week it was just, I mean, Samuel was ready to pour himself a cup of coffee and sit down and just have a conversation with Jen. And and I was invited along for the ride, even though I didn't understand about three-quarters of what he was saying. So that kind of led to this week to Jen talking more about work with angels. And I'm here as the secretary for anything that he would like to add, because I don't have a ton of angelic experience except with this particular one. So
Yeah, well,
that's how
this is
this.
it's pretty significant angelic experience, I would say. Channeling a seraphim who's just hangs out here with you and comments throughout your day, I feel like qualifies. So, yeah, we were trying to get a sense of where to start here, because I feel like our conversations have gone so far, and then Tava was saying maybe we should really rewind all the way back to a basis in angels and kind of talking about angels. And I'm the first person to tell you I am not an expert in angels by any means. All of this is just personal experience and things that I have gleaned and learned along the way. And like the take on the elephant, there's so many different types of experiences and so many different types of angels. And so this is just the tip of the iceberg that we'll talk about today. So I guess from a basic kind of standpoint, and this may be possibly the hardest thing to articulate, would be, what is an angel? And
Yeah.
and Samael may need to help me out on that and help you out on that. But my understanding is that an angel is absolutely a being of the divine. And I'm sure, Samael would be the first person to tell us that we are all aspects of the divine, but a specific aspect of the divine that is vibrating at a higher level than we are. They have a much higher perspective. And my understanding is that angels are divine beings that have not ever been embodied. So, a lot of times when we talk about guides or even some goddesses, they're beings that have been in a body before, who have been human, who have experienced being human. And my understanding is that angels are divine beings that have not had the embodied human experience, but that have a much broader vision and understanding of the all that is going on and everything that is happening, and are entirely, benevolent. They're here to help with our highest good. They have, of course, lots and lots of different divine tasks and divine abilities and things that they're here to be doing, but that they're always waiting and welcoming our invitation to come in and support us on our journeys. And because they are connected to the all in a sense where they haven't, come into a body and had a great forgetting, they are in a wonderful position to be able to really help us to reconnect with our divine purpose, to bring profound healing through to us in every aspect of our lives. And it looks like you're getting some messages, so I'm going to stop and let you see what Samael had to say about this, Artie.
Well, it was interesting because the first thing that I thought as you were talking about angels is sort of from an anthropological perspective. One of the things that's really interesting, if you study world religions, is that in just about every single culture we know of on Earth historically, there has been a representation of something that seems very much like an angel. And there's a few things that seem to show up everywhere in the world in cultures that weren't necessarily in contact with each other all at once. And angels is one of them. Most cultures also have some concept of a dragon, right? This huge amount of moving energy. And we can talk about dragons maybe on another podcast, but like the ancient Chinese peoples, they actually had something called dragon lines, which are similar. If any of you have ever heard of ley lines before, it's a similar concept. But so you had things, you had certain entities that all cultures sort of recognize have always been there. And angels are one of them. Now, obviously, different cultures practice and worship in different ways and have different histories. And so their take on this entity might be something slightly different. And as I was listening to Jen and I was thinking about this, Samael said, it is humans who separate divine beings into religions. Some of what certain faiths call gods have been angels. So we're using the term angel today for what Jen described. We have this being with a higher perspective, with a wider perspective that can see more of what is going on. And they are not in an embodied state of forgetting. They have that bigger picture and they can move around here and reach in and see things. One of the things that probably one of the number one questions I get from readers about the book of Samael is they say, well, you're a witch and he's an angel. How can those two things be the same? Like, how can you be interested in the Morrigan and listen to him at the same time? And Samael's answer to that is that humans go, okay, this is Buddhist and this is Catholic and this is Hindu and this is, but that among divine beings, they don't differentiate that they belong to a certain faith. And that a lot of times when a divine entity or power shows up here on earth, we're the ones who give it a name and say, these are their defining characteristics. But again, since we're just touching that part of the elephant, we may not have the same picture. That it's possible for all of these divine entities to exist, but we have to realize the influence that us as humans put on them when we're trying to define who and what they are. So um, it's completely possible for you to have a strong belief in angels and also have a strong belief in whatever faith you follow that may or may not contain what we sort of think of as a Christian view of an angel. Like Samael does not look like a cherub. At least not to me. He might, maybe he's a fat baby to somebody else. I don't know. I'm literally just getting him going no with his head right now. He did not. He did not appreciate that. Um, sorry, I was sorry about the fat baby reference. But if you look back at like the old um, early Christian and Judaic texts and things, and a lot of writers have written about, the layers of angels and the levels of angels and all of their specific jobs, but some of it is our interpretation of it, versus what necessarily may completely be going on. So you don't have to go, oh, well, I have a different background or a different faith, so the angel thing isn't relevant to me. There is something in the cultures that, and among your ancestors that is angel connected.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a good point. And Samael is so regularly reminds us of the idea that it is humans that separate and categorize and, create a hierarchy of everything. This is better than that. This is higher than this. This is better than me. And a lot of it has to do with our own categorization of where we place ourselves. And it's typically at the bottom. Anything that we consider divine is typically considered so much higher than we are. And Samael is constantly saying that's not how we look at things. I don't look at myself as above you. We're all just doing our part. We're all part of this, divine community, each doing our part, and it's all really important. And I love that you made that distinction that angels don't belong to Christianity. And I get that a lot as we delve more and more into working with different divine beings, that there it is very cross cultural. It's really just the
Yes.
lines where we've decided, okay, this is Hindu, this is Buddhist, and Jesus is another one of those. He has come into people who were Hindu and people who were all of these different religious backgrounds and shown up as, I'm another divine guide. I can help with your healing work. And people have
Right.
found that it didn't matter what their religion was outside of it, they could have this relationship. And same with the all of the various pantheons of goddesses and beings like that. I don't have to have been Greek to work with a certain goddess, or Egyptian to work with Sekhmet. It's like they're not seeing it that way. They're not looking at things in geographical terms or religious terms or otherwise.
The spirit doesn't have boundaries. It doesn't stop when you get to a political border. And all of this is actually it's really funny. It's reminding me of an experience I had yesterday that now I'm like, oh, that experience was to teach me, so I could say this on the podcast. So I was at this wonderful event yesterday. I mentioned earlier, it was a Highland Games Festival. And, all my novels take place in Scotland. So I was ready to get my Scotland on, right? And so I had, my tent at the fair and I was selling books and everything. And there were several other people in my vicinity who were vending, who I know who are of a pagan background. And this young woman came around, and I think she had her mother with her and maybe her brother, and they were shopping in our area. And she came up to me, and I'd been sitting there having a conversation with several other people of a pagan background at the time who had stopped by my tent. And she came up to me and she said, hi, I'm Christian, and I really want to pray for you. And I will tell you, so like I think I've mentioned on the podcast before, I've been protested. I've had people call me a devil worshiper because I'm a witch. I'm literally sitting in a tent surrounded by witchcraft books. And so the first thing, because of some of my past experiences, is I went, oh no, sometimes when people tell me they want to pray for me, what they're telling me is that my soul is going to burn in eternal fire and that, and I'm just like, but then I thought, wait a second here, hang on, because she was very earnest. And I said, you want to pray for me? And she said, yes, I'd love to pray over you. You have a beautiful smile. And I realized in that moment, my brain wanted to categorize into I am pagan, she is not. I'm going to assume she's going to treat me in a certain way, and I've got my defenses up. But she was earnest and she had a beautiful light in her face. And she wasn't saying anything negative about me at all. In fact, she was telling me that she recognized my positive energy and she wanted to acknowledge it with her positive energy. So I took a deep breath and I sat there for a second and then I said, I take any and all good energy that I can get. And she said, "Oh, that's wonderful." And her face lit up. And her mother stepped into, and they bowed their heads. And she out loud did this beautiful prayer for me that I would get home safely and that I would have a wonderful day and that I would have sustained energy to greet everybody around me. And I was sitting there because I mean, it was obvious that she'd been in my booth that I was a witch, right? There was not a word in it of, I don't like what you are. Instead, she was earnestly offering me her energy. And I thanked her so much for it at the end. And she looked just delighted. And they went on their way. And that led to a really interesting conversation between me and the other pagans because they were like, oh, she's been going around the fair trying to save people. And I said, she didn't offer me that though. She didn't say, you're doing it wrong. I'm trying to fix you. She just, I mean, and they were like, yeah, that was actually really nice. And I realized how predisposed I am because the human brain likes to categorize, to go, is this person a friend or an enemy? Is this, and by enemy, I mean, is it someone who's going to try to, um, put me down or tell me I'm doing it wrong or attack me in a certain way? And it wasn't. It was a complete, and so she left. She didn't tell me anything negative at all. But the reason I think I was able to calm down and receive, and I told people around me, I said, she is obviously a true believer in Christianity. She wasn't here on a power trip. She wasn't here, to try to convert me or save my soul. She came up, and the reason she wanted to talk to me is because I was smiling at everyone, and she wanted to honor it. And so it was a really interesting experience to sort of wrestle with my own fears and my own defenses. And I've got nothing against Christians who are true believers. Do I have a problem with people who use the guise of Christianity to perform unloving acts and exclusionary acts? Those people who are after power, I have issues with. But this was not one of them. She was a seeker on her own path, just like I was. We're taking vastly different routes to get there. But I realized as she was sitting there praying, she believes in angels and I do too. Right?
Yeah, that is so beautiful. I'm so glad that you shared that. And what an amazing and wonderful way for her to share her faith and her belief and her genuinely loving, pure practice of the basis of that religion, of
Right.
extending love to another human being. That's just beautiful. And I think the more we can learn from that, the better. All the lines and the delineations and the names that we call the various things that we believe or the things that we follow, at the basis of all of it, it's I'm supposed to love you. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I'm supposed to just love you. That's just so beautiful.
And it was the other thing that was neat was after she left, the other pagans in the tent, we were all talking about our reaction to it and how much religious trauma we all acknowledged that we had, that we needed to then deal with and talk about and be able to heal and set aside in ourselves. A lot of us do have tremendous amount of trauma and religious trauma, and we make assumptions the same way. But as pagans, I think a lot of times we know what it's like to be excluded based on our faith. And I want to make sure that we don't turn around and do the exact same thing when the person standing in front of us is a true believer in their faith. And because, like I said, there are lots of paths to get to the same source. And I really think that's one of the big lessons that I'm supposed to learn from Samael is, he showed up and said, I'm a seraphim. And I went, you've got the wrong faith. You're not supposed to be talking to me. We're all supposed to be talking to each other. And I needed to get over it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. So let me think. Okay, so back to or back around to the discussion of angels. So yeah, they've been around since way longer than we and have this really broad view of things. And I realized that we talked about, kind of coming in and the great forgetting. And it might be good for me to clarify what I mean in that and what Tava means in that. So, I think I speak for both of us, in our belief that when we are born, we come from this more infinite kind of space, this place of spirit where we are really connected with and have a greater knowledge of our life path, our soul and our soul's journey and what it is that we are wanting to or needing to experience and learn. And that when we then choose to be born into a body, that our soul enters that body, and as it does, it has an experience of forgetting, forgetting some of that entire big picture so that we can come down and experience in this like earth lab of learning to experience it differently and have an opportunity of seeing ourselves as a little bit more separate from each other so that we can view ourselves from a different angle. We can have all of these other people around us and things that seem like concrete objects around us, and that we can view that from a more individualized perspective. And from that perspective, we're able to learn from each other in a much greater way and learn more about ourselves and develop our own soul more personally. And so when we talk about that, the angels haven't gone through that forgetting since they're not here in a body and working on themselves through this path of being embodied as a human on the earth, that they maintain that higher picture. They maintain that higher perspective that we get when we leave our bodies and go back into that all, and we have a better sense of, yeah, this is how things really work. And I feel like it's really a sense of unity, that we come back into more of a complete understanding of unity and the fact that everything is connected, that we are really all one. And from that perspective, it's probably very easy for us to recognize that there's not a hierarchy among angels and humans and this type of soul and that type of soul, but that we're all one. And because the angels are still perpetually in that place, there's a lot of wisdom that they can offer us. And they also have a tremendous power to bring healing to the earth and to us as individuals and as souls. And so part of what I want to talk about today is how we can access that, how we can access that wisdom, how we can access that healing and utilize that for ourselves and for others.
There's a ton of stuff coming through here.
I was to say, I
Um,
see you doing lots of writing.
I'm going to need multiple pieces of paper.
Yeah.
Um,
At the beginning, she showed me this small, like half sheet of paper that she had to be able to write down messages. And I was thinking, yeah, I hope you have more of those.
yeah, one side's done. Now here's the other side. So this, as you were talking, as Samai often does, time and space kind of operate differently for him. He doesn't see it the way we see it. So often, as Jen is talking, he is talking simultaneously about the same topic, like almost ahead of what she's saying, like he's already hearing it. And this is what he said. Why are you here? You are here to learn and to aid, and to attempt to live that life in connection and empathy, despite the challenges of being material and in a body. This is a choice your soul made, sacrifice you made for the all to move forward and develop and grow. There is purpose for all you do. Your life has great meaning to all of us. Thank you for living. Thank you for accepting the forgetting. Thank you for suffering in a body. So, yeah.
Nice.
Uh, so, what Jen was just saying about there isn't a hierarchy of this God is greater than that God, and this being is better than this being. it really is all of this unity, and that we are souls who chose to come to this plane because it is, as Jen said, a lab. It's a place of learning. And we sort of shrugged off those lovely aspects of the divinity where we remember everything and we feel connected to everything, to come here not just to move ourselves forward, but to move our ancestors, or the souls that we think of as our ancestors, who will also probably come back as our children and our descendants someday, and to help move angels forward too. That it's all all of these different beings. When I mentor people now, they will say, "Will this God or goddess love me?" Because they have this view that we're down here and that the divine is way up here. But according to Samael, after Jen and I have shuffled off this mortal coil, we'll be able to remember again. We'll be able to connect with all of these divine beings again, and we will be in the same group. We all have different jobs. Angels have different jobs from us. Um, but our job here on this earth is, despite the struggles and the pain of being in a human body, to still be able to reach out to others on this earth and form connections, and to do it with empathy. And Samael has often spoken about empathy, that you are truly manifested as a human being, and you are doing the work that your soul chose to do here, when you can look at other people and beings around you and put yourself in their shoes and say, "I want to reach out and make your time here better." If you spend any time among Buddhists, the elimination of suffering is everything, right? Is trying to um, get to a place where you can love without attachment. Because the attachments that we all have here right now, that aren't soul attachments, the attachment we have to our car, or the attachment we have to our house, or the attachment we have to where we're going for dinner tonight, they're all just part of this particular incarnation. And while they are nice, they are not, they're not that divine work. And they're, after we kick the bucket, I'm gonna really not kick. I'm gonna be like, "Oh wow, I spent a lot of time at McDonald's in that incarnation. All right, well, French fries were delicious when I had a body. Moving on." And that's not gonna be, that's not the big thing. But if I can speak to the McDonald's drive-through cashier politely and with empathy, now I am doing soul work.
So, when you were talking about empathy, empathy and compassion and sympathy are things that we talk about in a lot of detail in one of the Reiki classes that I teach. And a lot of that understanding for me comes from Jonathan Goldman and his book, The Gift of the Body, and working with him in his teachings. And he talks about empathy. I hear Samael talking here about empathy and us having empathy for each other. And I think that it's important for us to find the line between being able to place ourselves in someone else's shoes so that it can ignite compassion, versus taking on that person's portion of their work to do and carrying that around as this lodestone. And a lot of people who are doing energetic work, a lot of people who are drawn to Reiki and other kinds of energy healing, and I think a lot of people in general are empaths, or really, empathetic, where they not only can tap into someone else's pain, but then tap into it to such a point that they are then carrying it themselves. And I believe that my understanding from the messages that I've received are that we are not meant to carry it. We are meant to have it ignite compassion. And Jonathan describes compassion. He says, and this is reading from The Gift of the Body, which is his book. He says, compassion is a vibration, a quality of energy. It is not abstract. It is not a philosophical concept spoken about by the Dalai Lama. It is not a metaphor for anything. It is the thing itself. The root from which compassion grows is divine love, and that love is the deepest substance in the universe. It is the basis of everything that exists. And he talks about that compassion is a universal force that macrocosmically surrounds everything, not just your heart. And essentially, that what we need to do is hold people and ourselves in situations in a place of compassion, and that compassion is not just loving and caring for someone, but it is, like Tava was saying, that space of detachment from outcome. That in a space of compassion, he says the compassion of the divine is what is responsible for free will. In the small sense of human relationship, compassion is completely respectful of the choices that another makes. And, it's important for us to allow others to have their experiences and to hold them in this vibration of compassion where we are completely loving without judgment and without attachment to an outcome. They don't need to fix themselves, to heal the situation, to do something in order for us to love them. And that love is also not identifying with their pain. It's not holding on to it or carrying it or trying to fix it. It is literally a vibration that we hold, and that space of compassion actually lives in front of the heart chakra in its own space in our energy field. So it lives. If you could see me, it looks like I'm holding a basketball in front of my chest, maybe like 4 inches out. And that is the actual space that compassion lives in our bodies. And if we can bring ourselves into that space and activate it, it helps us to live that vibration of loving another to the extent that they don't have to please us. They don't have to fix anything. They don't have to be different, but we can just hold them in that space. And I know it looks like Tava is like jumping out of her
Like,
skin because she has
oh
all
my
these
God.
messages while I was talking.
No, the thing that was here, it's so funny, is right before you said that last bit. So you were talking about something, and then right before you did that, Samuel literally said almost the exact same thing. Like, I almost wish I had one of those like top-down document cameras going so you could see his stuff coming through as you're talking, because it's wild. Like, you're
Wow.
saying stuff, and right before you say it, he's saying something on the exact same lines. Because this is what he did right before you said that. Do not drown in another's emotions. Do not become the sufferer. You are holding the rope on dry land when another drowns. You are there to ground them and show them the way out, not plunge in with them. They must be a part of saving themselves. If you throw yourself in beside them, you will be of no use. And this was right as you were talking about so many people who do energy work are empaths, and they feel like, they feel it so deeply that soon they're weeping along with the person who's suffering, rather than being able to be stable and extend a hand and say, I know you're doing deep work right now. I'm here if you need me. But if you just throw yourself into the water next to the person who is suffering, now there's two people drowning. The third party is going to have to come along and pull you both out. And it's a hard lesson to learn, because I think a lot of people think that having a non attachment means that they are cold and uncaring. It's not. You're holding the other end of the rope. You are still attached in a way. You're just not holding them as both of you lose your air. And as you were talking about the space in front of the heart where compassion lives, he said, yes, 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 Jonathan speaks true. It is a matter of the heart.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love it. And your story, what you were saying, and he was talking about like not diving in Jonathan's book. One of the things that he says, and I deal with this a lot in energy work, and so many people that come to Reiki that are, start doing it, but then they want so much for things to change for the other person that they connect, they enmesh their energy and their issues and their karma then with the other person. And they're not able, you can't really be of help to that person if you are enmeshed then in the same things that they are. And I've heard so many times that, if you're in vibrational alignment with the problem, you cannot be in a vibrational alignment with a solution. And that if
Love
you,
that.
isn't that amazing? And it makes so much sense. It's like if you're on that level, I think of it as being in a high rise building. And if you're on like floor number 3, and that's where all the problems are, but the solution is on floor 6, you need to be up on floor 6 sending down the information. And Jonathan shares, he says, one of my Brazilian teachers told me, quote, when someone is in a hole, a true healer doesn't automatically pull them out. You may very well be powerful enough to take them from the hole, but if they haven't resolved inside them that which caused them to need to be in the hole in the first place, they'll just find another hole to fall into. A true healer observes them in the hole, prays for them, holds a space of compassion for them to learn what they need to learn, resists their own neurotic need to be a hero and pull someone, anyone out of the hole, and recognizes the moment the person is ready to climb out. Then the healer reaches down and gives them a hand to leave the hole once and for all.
I love that so much. Like, if I didn't already have so many tattoos, I would put that on my body. And I was thinking about it as you were talking. Samael being an angel, that is very much how he operates. He can see things from a wider perspective than I can and from a higher perspective. And there are times, like especially when I was working in the house and I would have an interaction with one of the spirits there and I was frightened, where my first instinct was, Samael, come save me. Like, come do it for me. Come stand in the way of whatever's coming to get to me. But if the angels do that for you, you're never going to learn how to solve those problems on your own. And it is that learning that is helping pull everybody forward. So basically, you're going to have you're not helping the journey we all have on this universe together if you cut off your own learning and look for someone else to solve the problems for you. There's many, many, many times when I will ask Samael something and he either just goes quiet or he laughs. And I say, You're not going to tell me that answer, are you? And he says, No, because if he just gave me all the answers, I would never learn it. I mean, if you think about being in school, if there's just someone there feeding you the answers for every test, you never study, your knowledge never grows. And when you think about having a problem, there's an expression I know a lot of us use. Imagine you're having a tough time or you're in a bind, and a good friend comes along and they don't rescue you, but they give you a different perspective. And then you can help solve the problem from there. A lot of times you go, oh, you're such an angel. Like, I really appreciate you doing that, right? It's and that's what it is even here on earth among the embodied. Angels are guides. They are not rescuers and automatic solution givers because their goal, and as ours is when we're not embodied, is when we're in this human form to learn as much if we can. Is learning uncomfortable? Yes. Would it be really great if everybody rescued us all the time? Yes. But then the learning doesn't happen. And so, there are many times when I have stomped my feet in frustration and go, Samuel, just tell me the answer. And he doesn't because he is carefully choosing what he comments on and what he doesn't comment on. He's always there to lend support and encourage me and hold a place of compassion for me, but he's not just going to tell me what the answers on the test are.
And I want something that occurs to me as you're speaking, and I'm sure Samuel will be happy to correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it's all where you are on your learning, like in the house at the beginning. I think there are stages of where in the beginning, especially, I think it is really important to call in the angels to help you or to save you or to protect you when you need it, because at the beginning, when you were first in the house and you were first surrounded and you felt yourself physically starting to fade and you couldn't see and your heart was starting to beat out of his chest, you called him and you had the experience of him wrapping his wings around you and everything being okay. And I feel like without that, that's what creates our faith and trust that they are there, that we're not
Yes.
alone. And I think I had issues with this. I think at the beginning was the idea of, is it okay for me to call in an angel? Should I be doing themselves? Is the angel going to be like, oh, you should do that, or that's not a big enough issue for me to help you with? And my understanding is that they are always here and ready to help. It's
Yes.
just, if the thing that will be the most helpful is for them to wrap their wings around you and protect you and keep you safe, then that is what they will do. And if you are at a place of your learning and your relationship with them where it is in your highest good for them to just sit and go, all right, I've given you enough information and enough knowledge that you can do this now. And I've had the same experiences with Sekhmet where in the beginning she would come in. I needed the relationship. I needed the faith that she was there, and I needed to experience her power and her love and her capacity to transform something. And at the beginning, when she would come in and she would take something, and this is in like an energetic healing experience that I was doing for myself or for someone else, she would come in and I would ask her and she would consume whatever it was and she would transform it in her belly. And then there became a point when she would say, no, you eat it. And I'm like, whoa, I was asking if you would come eat that because that looks really nasty and I don't want to take it in that. And she's like, no. And there's that point. And I feel like it's the same place in the relationship that you've gotten with Samuel where he says, okay, now you do it. And I think
Yes.
the best of any kind of teachers are the ones that, you have to, nobody just knows how to do algebra.
Yeah.
So you have to have somebody come in who's knowledgeable and really show you how to do it. But once you know how to do it, then it's like, all right, just sit back, think about what we learned. But I want to be sure that because this is a podcast that we're kind of intending partially for people who are just getting into how do I connect, I want to be sure that you don't leave this with a sense of I should just do it all myself, because you will know when you are at that place in your relationship with a divine being where they are now saying, it's you have learned enough, I'm here and I'm supporting you and I'm going to hold you in this sacred space where you can learn your own strength. And it looks like you've been typing there, writing things again. So I will stop and we'll see what Samael has to say about that.
Says, it is like raising a child. All humans are children in the forgetting. You believe you are at the beginning. So when we choose to come down here, we're like, I've never lived before. I know what I'm doing. And we are literally babies. Like we don't have that perspective anymore. But the angels know what we're like both in a body and when we're out of the body. And Samael will often say, oh, yes, you're human right now. Like he knows he needs to back things way up and that I'm learning to walk. So he says, it is like raising a child. All humans are children in the forgetting. You believe you are at the beginning. We give information as needed. We observe and adjust. We support. Does the child need to be held or need encouragement to fly? And I think back on my experiences as a teacher, we might get a whole group of toddlers. I was a toddler teacher for many years. We might get a whole group of toddlers, and some of those toddlers would roll in the door the first day of school and turn around and go, "Bye, mommy," and that was it. They were totally fine. They did not need any support. They wanted to run. They wanted to play. They needed help getting a snack and getting a diaper changed, and they wanted a hug every now and then. And they were good on their own. And there were other kids that I was literally scooching around in a chair for 2 weeks with them on my knee because that was what that child needed to make the transition to independence. Because if I tried to put them down, they would just be distraught. And it wasn't that one child was doing better than the other. They all had come from different environments with their own little personalities and their own needs and their own experiences. And I needed to adjust that, child A is just going to need X from me, and child B is going to need a lot more support. But it wasn't that one of them was ahead or the other. So if you imagine every time our angelic beings that are always around us and willing to support and know us well when we are not embodied, they were there. Samuel said, I was there at your birth. And he was also probably there when I made my choice. Yeah, I'm going back down to earth for another round. He has to be a very patient being because, like, imagine if someone dear to you just suddenly had amnesia and they don't remember all of the learning and all of the experiences that they had before. And now you're tasked with being there to support them. You have to be patient. You have the big picture that you can't tell them everything about, or it will negate and invalidate the choice that they made. So he knows the choice I made before I got here. And he's watched me have to learn to walk and speak and find him all over again, over and over and over. And it's different every time. But at the same time, he honors the work that I'm doing in going through that because it's a lot less comfortable to be in a body than it is to be of the spirit as he is.
And I love it, to continue the toddler reference, which is something that had come to me before you started saying that. I was like, well, that's perfect. One of the things that I think so many people, and I know myself, tend to struggle with when they start working with a relationship with divine beings, with an angel or a goddess or some other aspect of the divine that they're wanting to connect with, is the idea of how they're going to be perceived. Like you were saying, people always ask, will they love me? And my understanding is that they always love you. They love
Yes.
you already. They love you unconditionally. And they look at us and what we consider huge mistakes. And I've done this and it's so bad and it's so terrible, and it's like it's just a part of your learning. And because they have the long view, they know that we're going to get there eventually, and you're going to make mistakes, and along the way those mistakes are things that you're going to learn from, and maybe something that was directly intentionally a part of your path that you may have even had a soul contract to have before you came, to make sure that you were sent in a certain direction and to drive you more towards the things that you need. And I've heard it said so many times that they kind of, if you imagine what it's like, and in order to help us get a picture of what it may be like to be them, imagine a toddler who is just starting to learn to walk, and you see them and they're fumbly and they start to take a step and they fall. And from their perspective, they're frustrated and they're trying so hard, and I can't walk and I'm never going to be able to do this kind of thing. But from the adult's perspective, looking at them, it's all love. It's like, oh, look at that. That was so good. You almost did it. Like,
Yeah.
every attempt that they make is beautiful and wonderful, and you're so proud watching them get closer and closer because we know they will learn to walk. There is no part of us that says, oh, I can't believe how stupid you are. You didn't get that on the first try. Oh, just stand up. You just put one foot and then you put the other foot and you balance. Like, how hard is that? We're not looking at them that way. And I think that's the way I think the angels and other divine beings like that look at us, is just, okay, yeah, that was such a good try. Awesome. I know you're going to get there. And they seem to have this relaxed, joyful thing. It's like through the whole thing, they're like, I know you're going to get it, and you're learning. Look at that. That's so wonderful. And I think anytime we start to self-deprecate and think, oh, they're not going to love me because of this, or they're going to be so mad at me because I do this, or I would have this fear that if I screw something up in my relationship with them, or I'm trying hard and then I do something that they're going to be really frustrated or not want to work with me anymore.
Yeah.
Just put yourself back in that watching a toddler learn to walk. And
Yes.
I
Yes.
really feel like that's the perspective that they have of us.
Yes. Samael says, you are supposed to be flawed. I mean, if you think about it, most of us spend our times going, if we do something good, we don't give it a second thought. We often can't even take compliments. But if we do something bad, has anybody ever had an argument with someone in your head for 3 days after the argument actually ended?
Yes.
Like somebody offended you or upset you, or God forbid, you think you offended someone else, and you literally spend 3 days beating yourself up over it or trying to find the thing you should have said in that situation, and you're just in this circle of crazy thoughts because you are angry at yourself for being flawed, right? Samael says you are supposed to be flawed, is part of your design. It is how you choose to handle those flaws that matters. Your fumbling is divine work. You are saving all of us. So every time you spill something down the front of yourself at a business meeting, or every time you don't say the exact right thing, or every time you are 15 minutes late for an important meeting, it's how you choose to handle that that helps to raise you to the next level of your work here. Is it, I'm going to eat myself up for 2 days? Samuel's like, that's not the way. I read something somewhere and I absolutely loved it. If talking about being late for something, that, if you do your best to be on time, but occasionally we're all going to be late. We're stuck in mortal bodies and we can't just zip around, right? And sometimes there's traffic or what have you. And I read about the difference between showing up and saying to someone, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm so sorry I'm late. Oh my God, what is wrong with me? Blah, 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 blah." And showing up to meet someone and saying, "Thank you for being patient with me. I want to tell you how full of gratitude I am for you on this really busy day of mine that you might be, that you waited. And because I know you're busy too. Thank you. I have great gratitude in my heart for this." And how it helps. First off, people tend to like it because now they're part of the process rather than watching you just abuse yourself for something that may not have been a very big deal to them at all. But second, you're also acknowledging your gratitude for what they did and the idea that you were stuck in a bind and they were part of your solution. And I love that shift in perspective of, instead of looking at this of how can I abuse myself, how instead, when I do have flaws, can I look at the people around me that support as I work through these very human flaws that we all have? And instead, I'm going to put that energy, instead of abuse to myself, I'm going to put it towards gratitude, towards and reaching out towards others. And I just thought, oh man, if I could learn to do that, that would be awesome.
I love that. I love that. I've never heard of that as a way of responding, and that's so perfect. And it reminds me when you were talking about rushing around and getting behind, one of the angels that I ask to come in a lot is Archangel Metatron. And I ask Metatron, who is all about time and space, and I will ask Metatron to come in and bring in divine timing for my day or divine timing for whatever's happening. And I realize ideally I would do that at the beginning of every day, of just ask for that divine timing and flow through. I tend to remember it most when I know that I'm leaving late or something is happening. But one of the things that I think it does for me, not only do I believe that Metatron actually does come in and support and bring in divine timing, but it helps me to remember that there is a difference between our human timing and divine timing. And so often, what I thought was me screwing up and having left late, and I'm beating myself up about it, and I'm kind of desperately calling in divine timing. And as I'm driving, something will happen, and I will realize if I hadn't been delayed by that number of minutes, then I would have potentially have been a part of that car accident that was there, or I wouldn't have been able to have seen the traffic. The traffic couldn't have backed up enough that I could have seen it in time to take that alternate route so that I could pick my daughter up on time. And so many times, in times that I've really settled into the idea of divine timing and allowed myself to be supported, then all of a sudden I start looking around and everything's a blessing. And when I trust that I'm going to arrive at exactly the time that's in the highest good for everyone, then a lot of times I'll get to that appointment that I was so stressed about being late for, and it turns out the practitioner was running late and they were really stressed and they were so grateful. And so then they got out just a minute or two before I did. So I wasn't waiting. And when they come out and they respond with, I'm so stressed, I'm so sorry, I say, actually, it was divine timing. I just so happened that I've only been here waiting for a few minutes. And it just shifts the perspective of everything. And a lot of the way that you were saying, it shifts it into a perspective of gratitude. Or when a car gets in front of me and is going so slowly, and normally it would be like, oh, come on, hurry up. I can look at it and say, thank you. And that's funny. I realize I always thank the angels for that. Like, I'm like, thank you, angels, for putting this person in front of me and slowing me down so that whatever it is, however I'm meant to get there, it's going to be in divine timing. And it shifts everything.
It reminds me of a story you were telling me last week. And Jen, you might be do a better job of telling this story than I did, about being up on the mountain where the plane crash was, and you were diverted to that because of traffic. So many years ago, there was a plane crash on a mountain near where Jen and I live. And then
So,
I think, was it about 2 years ago that you got a message that you were supposed to go up and offer support to the spirits on that mountain? Is
yes.
that correct?
Yeah. I'd
So,
received something saying, and it felt very clearly that the souls that were still stuck on that mountain and had not ascended were reaching out and asking me to come and clear.
and so there ends up being traffic. I think it was on the way back from dropping off your daughter, and you ended up getting routed over the mountain. And as you were driving over that mountain, you went, oh, and it was so funny because you left me a Marco about it. And as soon as you said the mountain, I went, oh my gosh, like I'd completely forgotten about that. And you said, well, this just strikes me in the idea of divine timing. You said that even though you'd gotten the message you were supposed to be doing something with these spirits a while ago, now the traffic caused you to divert and go over the mountain again. And you were reminded of that message and now realized that you had the tools to do what you needed to do. Were not necessarily in your spiritual toolbox back when you first received the message. And so you were able to actually carry out that job. And I would love if you would talk a little bit more about that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you make that correlation between what we were talking about, because I had carried a sense of kind of failure, or like I had dropped the ball, because it had been so long. When I had received the message, I felt like it was something I was supposed to do, but not right then. And I'd had a sense that it was maybe a year from then. And it was interesting because at the same time, I had a sense that I was both supposed to do it on my own, but also that you and my husband Keith were supposed to be a part of it with me. And I couldn't really make sense of that. And so I thought, well, since it's in the distance, and I admit I was a little intimidated. Okay, I was probably a lot intimidated by the idea. And in that message, I knew I had to go and be on that mountain where that happened. And so a plane had crashed in really low visibility. A plane had crashed directly into the side of the mountain, and everyone perished. And it was quite a traumatic sort of event. And a lot of times in those kinds of events, souls get kind of stuck, almost like replaying what happened or having a hard time accepting because it's so sudden. And I felt like those souls were reaching out, asking me to come and help them But the idea of just driving up onto that mountain was terrifying. I was like, I don't want to just drive up there, be like, I think this is about where this happened. I was afraid. And so I'd kind of put it off. And then, time kept passing. And then I kept thinking, well, so when am I supposed to just decide I'm going to show up and be like, oh, I think I'll do that today? But then the fact that it had been so long, I kept thinking I was called to do this and I haven't done it. And so I'd been kind of beating myself up about it. So because of traffic, I ended up knowing I can't go back that same route and ended up routed on there. And on that day, it was also very, very, very foggy. Like I was crawling on that mountain. And at the very beginning of it, I actually started Marcoing another friend of mine and started talking. And I was talking about this angel work and telling her about it. And all of a sudden I go, oh my goodness. No, okay, I'll continue this later. I know what I have to do. And it just came over me. It was like, I am on this mountain. I am barely moving. So it's going to take me a while to drive across. And it's really a road that goes right across the very like crest of this mountain, all along the length of it. And I knew what I had to do. And because of conversations and experiences that Keith had had just that previous week and things that had happened with Tava, I had all of the information, all of the tools that I needed to do this process in a way that I never would have done it if I had done it 2 years ago or even 2 weeks before. And it all came together of, oh, this is what it is. I'm doing it by myself, but I'm doing it with these two key pieces of information that came from the two of you. And so as I drove, I did a lot of various processes, but I called in the angels. I called in lots of specific angels to help with healing various parts of their journeys. And I won't go into that process of all that. But by the time I made it to the other side, I heard it is done. And then just so happened another traffic, running behind thing on the way back to go pick up my daughter. We had left what I felt like was a few minutes later. That was actually what I was talking about as far as traffic backing up. And so I was able to divert and go back that way. And when we drove across the mountain the second time, I could feel the energetic shift. It was totally different. And I was so relieved to have that second opportunity to drive that mountain that day and realize that it really was lighter. Things really had been cleared. And that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been so-called running late. And at the beginning of it was still beating myself up about it.
Incredible. I mean, that's the meaning of divine timing for me is, you know, you have a message, but it didn't necessarily make sense at the time. You had both me and your husband were supposed to help, but we weren't. And then through this process, the timing all works out for you to have the tools that you need, and the message makes sense, and you were able to do what you needed to do. I will tell you that ever since you have said Metatron's name, Samael is literally just sitting in the background saying that name over and over and over and over and over again.
All right. Well, I am definitely up for hearing what he has wants to tell us about Metatron.
Like you're sitting there talking and he's going, Metatron, 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 Metatron. So there
You know,
seems to be some excitement to follow up discussion of Metatron with something along the lines of sound and numbers and shapes and vibrations, and talk about a little bit about what you were just
yeah,
speaking of. I think we may have to have an episode on this.
I feel like we're just barely scratching the surface of even what we're supposed to talk
Yes,
about. So I would
yes,
love to add
yes.
a to be continued to this week
To
for
be
sure.
continued. Absolutely.
So, wow, this podcast has definitely taken a completely different turn than where we thought it was going to go. And thank you for hanging in here with us and going on this wild and crazy journey with us. I want to offer to everyone who is listening an opportunity to receive some angelic healing at the end of this. And this is a type of healing that I have started doing and added to my Reiki work, and I find it absolutely incredibly powerful. That is something that I will place in bonus content so that you can access that whenever you're in a place where you can really stop and receive it in a safe manner. So I hope that you really enjoy it.
Yes. Thank you so much for everything today. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
listeners, for tuning in. I'm turning you over into Jen's hands. Until next time.
To ensure that we end this session, this podcast, in a good grounded place, because I know the energy has gotten really strong in this, at least for me. I will kind of sing us into a space of groundedness. So until next time, know that you are walking this path with angels, and they are just there waiting for you to invite them in. And I very much hope that you do. Be blessed.